Please welcome Chief Strategy and Marketing Officer, Tim Minahan.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. You're almost there. Hey, so for the past few years, really, here at Splash and beyond, we've all been talking about the future of finance, AI and data speed and resilience. And at first, it was really about the CFO becoming more strategic. And now, it's really about finance becoming that engine that drives the business forward. So finance leaders like you are being asked to navigate constant change. We've heard that this week. Rising complexity and a level of uncertainty that just doesn't seem to take a day off. And that's why we're here today, to explore how actual finance leaders like you are stepping into this moment. Now, a few years ago, we started the dialogue by launching what we call the Finance 2035 initiative. And in the simplest form, it was designed to answer two questions. How will the role of finance evolve over the next decade? And what do finance leaders like you need to do to succeed during that journey? And so we interviewed thousands of finance and business executives. And since then, we've held roundtables and discussions with hundreds more, including some of you here today. And what we learned was remarkably consistent. So first, finance teams just aren't being asked just to close the books faster or report better. You're being pulled increasingly into the center of the business. And under this broader remit, you really need to balance two things at once. On the one hand, you need to engineer stability. And on the other, at the same time, you need to accelerate change for the business. So that's what's led us to Forward Finance. We view this as really an emerging operating model for what high-performing, AI-ready finance organizations will look like. And importantly, this framework didn't just come out of a lab or some ivory tower. It was really built alongside hundreds of finance organizations, industry experts, partners, business leaders who are all doing work on this in real time. We examine how forward-looking finance firms are using this moment to rethink and to rebuild their workforce strategies, their decision-making, and their entire operations around AI. And when we looked at the leaders, 5 patterns seemed to show up just time and time again. First, finance is increasingly taking on the role of data steward. And that doesn't mean just chasing perfect data, but trusted data with auditability and governance, as you've heard earlier this week. Second, finance is really becoming the chief strategist for the company. As it applies to AI, that doesn't mean just guiding AI strategy for your own function, but for the business. Third, finance is really stepping into the post of chief operator. So no longer will finance be an island. It will be embedded within the business, guiding operational decisions around things like pricing and supply chain and workforce and more. And then to affect all these positive changes, finance must become, let's say, BFFs with IT. So finance and IT really moving as one team with one roadmap, one set of priorities in guiding the business towards this AI-powered enterprise. And then finally, as you've heard throughout the week, AI is fundamentally resetting where we work, who does the work, and what skills and talents are required to do it. So prompted by AI, finance is becoming really this workforce architect for this new emerging enterprise model, redesigning roles and functions, building confidence, and augmenting and elevating talent. But forward finance isn't just a destination or an endpoint. It's a progression. And that's why today's panel matters so much. You're going to hear from leaders who are living forward finance right now. Like you, our panelists are actively navigating those trade-offs, making real decisions in real time, and figuring out what actually works in this AI era. And so we're fortunate enough to have 3 esteemed finance leaders on our panel Colin Schmidt from General Mills, Val Bowler from Cargill, and OneStream's own Chief Accounting Officer, and my friend, Pam McIntyre. Now, moderating the conversation is futurist and AI expert Glenn Hopper, who really has a gift for turning these big ideas into practical insight. So please join me in welcoming our panel.
All right, panel, thank you all for being here, and thank you all for being here as well. I do want to point out at the beginning, there's a big QR code up there. If you guys have questions, we want to leave some time for Q&A at the end, so be sure and enter your questions through the app on the QR code there. I love the intro with the 5 dimensions. We've been talking about the 5 dimensions for several weeks now, and it really, we'll try to keep the questions kind of around those a little bit. But those 5 dimensions, if we think about that and we go back to our offices and we're thinking about what all needs to happen as we're deploying AI across our organizations, really a great framework to keep in mind. And with that, I want to start with you, Pam, because you've been on both sides of this. You were a OneStream customer back in 2015, and now you run finance as the CAO here. And so you've seen the evolution from both sides, and I'm wondering, to kick us off, when a company says they're ready for AI, what do you look at first? I mean, how do you separate and identify, okay, you actually are really ready for AI versus being somewhere else on the spectrum? Their data foundation needs to be able to carry that weight, so I'm wondering, where do you start with that?
Yeah, it's a really good question because we've had a lot of conversations internally, and I can think back to my very first OneStream implementation in 2015. And even though we were on a single ERP and we were global, the way people used every account, the way people used all of the data was different. So we had to bring it together and have an ownership structure, understand how it actually correlated to the data and the results that we were bringing together. So IT can pull in all the data, but if it doesn't reconcile, if it doesn't deliver the message and it doesn't reconcile to the results, it's not good data. So how does AI understand all of those things together? So you have to have a mechanism, ownership, accountability, and actually drive the organization to partner to make sure the operational data and the financial data tell the same story.
And I guess, Colin, I want to go to you next, and I'm not going to try to go negative right out of the gates, but I think we're also all, it's a jagged frontier with generative AI, so there's fits and starts along the way, and I'm wondering, and maybe you can hit this from both sides, but I think all of us here, we've seen the MIT study that everybody still talks about from last year, that 95% of all AI or generative AI projects fail to meet ROI. And I think we've all tried something with AI that didn't pan out, and it's sometimes easy to get frustrated with that. But I'm wondering, do you have any examples where you tried to launch something with AI and it didn't quite work out? And if so, what can you kind of learn from that? And this is the AI strategist part of the dimensions, I guess.
There you go, and I'll try not to skew too negative here, but no, it's a great question. And as I think about us and where we are at General Mills, probably not that different than many in the room and on this panel in terms of where we are in our, by the book AI or Gen AI journey within the finance function, and that we're a little bit slower, or maybe I should say cautious in terms of our adoption relative to especially our peers and other functions in the organization, and with good reason. And maybe we'll get to some of those reasons in the panel. But I would say we are still very much in exploratory mode. We are trying to dive in. We are piloting, which is a good thing. But as I think about some early pilots and experiences, to your point, not all, actually very few at this point have gotten fully over the line and scaled within the finance context. And I'd say a few reasons as to why, especially as I think about maybe in the FP&A space, for instance, where we are looking to solve a common problem or to automate a routine task that an FP&A leader performs on a recurring basis. And there's a number of reasons why. first is probably as I think about some of the examples that we have, we probably weren't as tight as we needed to be in terms of the true problem, the root of the problem we were actually trying to solve with the initiative. And with that, a crystal clear business case in terms of what we were trying to drive in terms of the value. I think that's something that we all are accountable for. And I don't know that in every case we're as diligent as we need to be in the upfront context setting and business case development side of things. So that's probably point one. Point two is maybe the more important part, which is resourcing. And do we have the right people on this work at the right time? We all know there is so much going on in our space in finance. We're asked to do a lot in the organization, not just in finance, but also with our IT organization. And what we learned is while we're in this kind of exploratory pilot mode, I would refer to it as kind of beg, borrow, and steal mode in terms of resources across the organization to make something happen. And I think that has been one where, okay, we didn't necessarily have the right skill sets in terms of data science, in terms of data engineering, and the right focus and energy against what we're actually trying to deliver. So think about business case, but then also the right people involved. And so we've taken this as a really important, this is the point of pilots, right? It's okay to fail, because I think one of the biggest things here is that we've learned. And we've learned how we should step back and think a little bit more pragmatically and strategically about how we want to approach AI, especially in finance and in FP&A, with a little bit more intention. And so that comes with, vision, roadmap, the right people, procuring and lobbying within our large organization for the right individuals to really attack this with more purpose. And I'm eager to see where we go with it. I mean, we're very much in early days still, but I think again that's one of the point of diving in and learning, because I wouldn't call it a failure. I would say we learned quite a bit in terms of framing how we go forward.
And I think an important and interesting distinction there, as you mentioned, AI and machine learning engineers, data scientists, those are probably the top-down bigger projects. But there's also rolling out, whether it's Copilot or ChatGPT or Claude or whatever you're using in the companies. This question for the three of you, are you seeing who's authorized and who has the ability to recommend a pilot? Are you seeing pilots that are coming like from, I'm a financial analyst or I'm a controller or whatever the case is, but I've got a pretty good use case, I can roll out a pilot? Are you seeing sort of that bottoms up people driving other than the AI engineers kicking these things off?
I mean, we were all kind of talking about it a little bit in back, because we were talking about the resources, as mentioned, in the collaboration, because when you change one process, it impacts another. And so resource and resource alignment, as he mentioned, was the number one topic to make sure that these projects can get initiated, the budget's allocated, the team is there. Otherwise, you might want to do that thing, but you don't have the resource alignment, the project management that needs to actually accomplish it. So as you mentioned, the blueprint, the execution, the goal, really understanding the impact to the organization and other functions as you're changing something is very important. As we change OneStream, for example, or you change other systems within your company, all of those things and the impacts to other people are really important, and AI is no different.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah. I guess just to build on that, I'd say as kind of combining the two answers, my answer from prior is that yes, I think in the early days, there's a lot of energy and excitement about AI, and especially as we launch enterprise tools, maybe others have these as well, where we're kind of LLM that's in-house and enterprise IT sponsored capabilities that we need. Okay, so how do we deploy this and leverage this in finance? And I would say, like in the early days, the ideas from leadership are bouncing from all over the place, and from bottoms up, tops down. Well, that's great to see the energy, but we've got to find a way to kind of corral that and harness that energy, but bring it together through one kind of governance intake process. And so as a finance capabilities team and as a leader, that's on my job to help kind of communicate and drive the right ideas through the right intake process and governance process. Otherwise, it kind of feels like the Wild West at times.
Yeah, that's very important to have that, because there's so many capabilities or that to the frontline employee may seem like this is really cool the way I'm using this. It could be a security risk. It could be something, well, that's
Exactly.
completely unauditable or whatever the case is with that. So I want to jump to the chief operator dimension. And Val, I want to go to you on this, just because every time we've talked about this a couple times, and every time I say it, I just think of what a crazy, daunting situation it was. But Cargill consolidated more than 100 ERPs into one platform, and I can't imagine what the reporting nightmare it must have been prior to that. But now you're at a point where you're actually consolidated, you're trying to layer AI on top. And from where you sit, having seen what the reporting was like prior to that and where you are today, where would you say AI is genuinely changing how the work gets done today? And maybe on the flip side of that, are there areas where the AI hype is maybe a little bit ahead of where the reality actually is?
Yeah, I think even if I set AI aside for a second and think about the journey we've been on to lay that foundation, to be able to be in the position to be thinking about that as a part of our strategy now, our project to go up onto OneStream was truly transformational for us at Cargill. So we really transformed the data, the process, the reporting is different. We're hitting deadlines we weren't before. And so for us, that was a big foundational step to really have the privilege to sit here today and say, okay, now how can we advance on top of that, right? So spending a lot of time thinking about what that can look like. We definitely see opportunities. We also see pilots happening in our forecasting space as well. But we're also really tuned into that ROI concept. I think if you think about the bottoms up, tops down reference that Colin made, I think we have a lot happening amongst our employees, myself included, to make our own lives easier. But when we look at it kind of across that process, we're really looking for where can I leverage AI across multiple process steps such that there actually is a return for that. And we are still also very much in kind of strategy pilot mode with that to see what it looks like. And I think in a lot of ways, your question about where is the hype different from the reality, I think across the record to report processes in particular, there is a lot of hype. There are not a lot of use cases yet where AI is closing your books. Or, I see it a lot in what I would call the peripheries, right? Like referencing policy documents and making life easier. Or I can ask it about my data structures and it will tell me something like that. But I've done quite a bit of benchmarking to make sure I'm not missing the boat on something, but haven't yet seen it where it's really covering multiple steps of your close in a magical way. Yet, it will. It's not yet.
Yeah. And I guess as a follow-up to that, you've heard it here a million times, and we talk about this in any AI implementation, but data is the foundation that AI is going to be built on. And if you don't have your data house in order, this is, we've been talking about digital transformation for 30 years, and this is, if you haven't digitally transformed, I don't know what that means at this point, but if you haven't gotten your data house in order, I think we're all still dealing with dozens of ERPs or siloed systems where the CRM and the ERP and other systems are not talking to each other. Even as maybe we're not ready for prime time with a lot of generative AI work, we're experimenting with it, we're doing the pilots. With that data right now, are you guys already thinking about how are we gonna measure ROI on these projects? Are you gathering the metrics and understanding where you are, whether it's the amount of time that it's taking to do something in the close process or to get a report or maybe revising your data dictionary a little bit to help get it ready? Are there steps that you're taking now that are, okay, I understand we're experimenting today, but these are things we can do while we wait for the technology and while we sort of figure out how to use AI? And that, to the three of you.
I guess I'll start because you and I talked about like the ROI investment is either higher revenue, lowering cost, or being more efficient. However, there's also other intangibles of going through this exercise, and you can't wait till everything's perfectly aligned because otherwise you'll never start. Even with a project like a OneStream project, a lot of companies wait until all of the processes are perfect and everything is ready to go. But you can map things, you can come up with a transitional process, you can go through step plans and have a blueprint. So same thing with AI, that ROI is gonna be trial and error. What you think that you might get out of it may not be what you expected, but there's gonna be an alternate path and outcome. You heard Drew in the keynote talk about how much more they're getting out of coding, but that was a learning curve. If he took the first time he used it and was disappointed in the outcome and never kept training it and teaching it, he wouldn't be where he is today with the ability to leverage it, train it, and actually get more out of what he's doing on a daily basis.
Yeah, I think the add I would make is the other way that we've thought about it is, can you actually leverage AI in a part of a process to free up space for the people who work on that process to really go hard at the process itself, right? Which is that balance of maybe my process isn't perfect, but I can still move and do something, and then leverage that extra time to really work hard on what should this process look like, so that you're doing a little bit of both versus kind of waiting for it to be perfect before you move.
I think that, yeah, and a theme there is that an ROIing, if that's a word, that is tricky.
Yes.
And we need to be okay with that. I think we know this is powerful and it's gonna make us more efficient and effective at our job, and we're gonna make smarter, faster decisions. What's an ROI on that? I don't necessarily know, but we can do some math and feel pretty good about it. So I'm not trying to contradict my point earlier on the business case, because I think that is really, you gotta be really clear that we feel really good about this and why. But I also think we have to be in a position now where it's not like installing a line in a plant. Like it's not necessarily going to be, which, you know, so we have to be comfortable with a little bit of the ambiguity in terms of how we think about the quantitative return of these investments.
Yeah. One thing that's interesting to me, so I know you guys were all at the executive summit yesterday, and if anybody out here was, Michael Gallipan, the economist, came and spoke to the group yesterday, and he talked about productivity. I don't remember the exact numbers, but it had gone from like 1.7 to 2.4 in the past couple of years, which is, when I hear, and we're going to talk, Pam, in a minute about ROI in particular, but I think about the gains that we're getting in that bottom-up level of just people using Copilot, using Gemini, whatever their tool is. I think a lot of times we're not really taking that into account yet, but even, I mean, and maybe from a finance perspective, yes, with the big project, if we have a big capital investment or we're, you know, some new software expense, we're gonna figure out how to get to the ROI on that. But do you guys think about how you measure those individual productivity gains, and whether it's, I mean, there's intangibles like I'm able to make more data-driven decisions because I'm not spending all my time swivel chairing data or all that.
Yeah.
How do you guys look at those individual gains?
Glenn, the thing that you have to think about, Michael's research was reflective of the history, right? A lot of companies, Val and I were just talking about it, have constrained access to AI. And so only recently have they started unlocking the ability, creating enterprise AI strategies. And so that return on investment and that, you know, opportunity is probably much higher, and we'll see that grow over the next couple of years. I think the next time we see his slide, it'll be almost 3x, and so we'll see that evolve. And Val, I was actually curious to hear from you. You mentioned the constraints that you have had to deal with in trying to get the enablement with your organization, and that would not be the same measure in Val's organization. So.
Yeah, no, definitely feel it, and I think getting used to, you know, the tools that are available, right? I do think there's a cultural piece to that. If you think about it from your own individual mindset, myself included, I have times where I'm working on something, I'm like, I don't need to be doing this. Like, I can ask Copilot to do this, but I need to get that in the top of my mind. And I would say if you look across your whole team, everybody's in a different spot on that. I mean, you have leaders on that scale that are over there, you know, doing amazing things, and then you have others that are like, that's gonna blow over, like, in the full scale as you would expect, right? So I think some of it is about like training up your team to think about it that way. Like myself included, I do the same. I'm like, I'm gonna experiment with this for a half hour and just start to learn more and more and more, but getting that mindset across is really important, because I think it will get measurable, that kind of individual productivity part, but I don't think we're there quite yet.
Yeah, it's difficult to measure, but I think it starts with tone at the top. It's got to be an expectation from your leaders that you've got to start using these tools, and whether that's through tracking adoption, not at the individual level, but at least as a function, ensure we're making progress and we have the right L&D surround to ensure that people feel equipped to use the tools. And the big theme for us right now is, okay, I get it can help me an LLM can help me summarize an email or brainstorm, and it's really powerful in that way. Bring it to life for finance. How do I actually leverage this in my day job? We're not there yet, but I think with some of the tools we've released in terms of how we think about connecting them to data, or even indirectly through uploading data to these tools and just learning, building that confidence and getting that experience, sharing the ideas, is really important. Of course, there are governance considerations in terms of what data you can upload and when that we've worked through with through the enterprise. But you've just got to start diving in.
Yeah, there's the governance issue, and then also keeping a human in the loop and making sure that some analyst isn't just copying and pasting direct out of ChatGPT and sending it on, and it kind of makes its way up the chain where no human can explain the number that might be hallucinated. I think hard ROI is, we're getting the pressure right now of you have to do AI and you have to show ROI on it. And Pam, you mentioned this, but your 3 buckets of revenue lift, COGS reduction, and or maybe efficiency and insight at a lower labor cost. Where do you think finance is really competing today in those 3 buckets? And is there one where finance it's a great idea, but we haven't quite gotten there?
I think finance will lean into all 3, if I'm honest, because the way that we've talked about it being the control tower of the company, each one of those will be an initiative that somebody in finance will partner with whether it's the head of sales and your CRO, whether it's the people that are dealing with your cost or your inventories. All of those things are going to need somebody within finance, whether it's a divisional finance person or whether it's a corporate finance person, to help digest, ingest, understand, make sure the data is complete and accurate. That is part of the analysis to determine the ROI. But those things will evolve over time, and people will learn their places and how to partner with the organization, because you have to build that influence. You have to get the alignment. You have to get people to understand and agree. Otherwise, there'll be friction and bottlenecks, and you'll just be butting heads along the way with who's right and who wants to do what. But if you don't have inventory, you can't sell it. So the inventory has to be in the right place at the right time to sell it. And how do I make sure that AI can help me understand what those keys are, what those trends are, making sure that I can see, oh wow, there's a big concert that's going to be held in this facility and my restaurant doesn't have enough food or waiters or waitresses to staff up. Those are going to be the evolution of how we can make sure there's more revenue. But on the flip side, if the concert is canceled because of rain and it's an outdoor concert, all of that food goes to waste. So how do you actually measure and make sure that you have a plan, and you have the right inventory, and you have the right people to actually deliver and build the right results?
Yeah, I think there's a really big role for finance to play in that, because I think if you look across all of the functions of the organization, all of whom are hearing, we need to get going on AI, let's go faster. Finance is in a unique position to have the right conversations, to really sift through, is this a good idea, and is it going to hit one of those pieces that Pam talked about or not? There's just a pragmatic voice that finance can bring to the table for that.
Definitely, absolutely. I want to jump over, and this has been a steady theme, whether it's in the panel presentations or people I've been talking to at the conference, is that IT finance relationship. And Colin, maybe we'll start with you because of your unique role. As the finance capabilities lead, how is your relationship, I guess, how's it structured on AI spend and governance between finance and IT? And is it a formal roadmap, or is it something more that you're kind of feeling it out as you go? How's that working?
Yeah, good question. So I have the privilege of leading our global finance capabilities team, and just step back, that we are tasked with leading and governing what I'd call the financial infrastructure of the organization. So stewarding core systems like OneStream and the data and surrounding processes we are accountable for, and also as a result, we also play an important role in advancing our functions' digital maturity, including AI. And you might imagine, okay, so you think about where we are in the organization, we're kind of in that in between the business and the IT organization. And I would argue we are very much attached at the hip with our D&T partners, have been for years. You might say we're BFFs, as I heard earlier, but it's a great way to put it because I view our IT org as very much extensions of our team and vice versa, and I would like to think they do as well in this space in particular. It's so important that we're on the same page. You mentioned roadmap. We co-develop our roadmap in terms of finance capabilities hand in hand with our IT team. And many of us on the the finance capability space, actually have kind of a hybrid skill set of IT experience, but have the finance background, and then we also partner directly with IT through this role. So we are co-collaborating on where we're headed as an org. I think with AI, we're looking to just evolve on that model because we have a proven model in terms of that partnership that's really important. In terms of prioritization, I'd say, again, we both play a role. Finance probably plays more of an active role in terms of strategic rationale for the need, the meeting the right business requirement, the right value to the conversation earlier. And then on the IT org, more so around technical fit and resourcing from their standpoint. Of course, resourcing from our point is also a consideration as we think about prioritization. So that's how we get the organization rallied around where we're headed in finance, and then how we get into the nitty gritty, like what are we going to work on and when and how, from whom. And in terms of I think you mentioned budget too. So finance plays obviously an important role in terms of setting our IT budgets for the entire organization, including our finance IT budget. And then in terms of what makes it or doesn't make it in terms of the initiatives, I kind of just hit on that in terms of decision rights. So I'd say, like, again, finance kind of plays an important role in terms of business need and ultimately makes the eventual call in terms of what fits in that budget, but also IT plays, veto rights, ensures that it meets our architectural needs as well from a system standpoint. So again, it's a really tight
Colin, I have a
connection.
question. So you mentioned that you guys are BFFs, but then finance is the decider at the end of the day. If you have a different decision than IT wanted, how does that?
We have never disagreed.
Oh, good.
Matt?
Kumbaya.
We'll talk about it later.
There's
See if
actually,
it's
I won't get
true.
into specifics. There's a live example in my head right now where we are still not agreeing on something, and that's okay.
It's okay because you
and
get
in
to
that
decide.
case, so what's that?
It's okay because you said finance decides, so you get to win no matter what.
Finance doesn't just exclusively decide. So when we can't align, that's a good question, and that's where we escalate to leaders and we have the right conversation. Okay, well, here's for this given, technically in this case, it's a particular platform for a particular team in finance, advocating for very specific capabilities, and it doesn't necessarily fit like the enterprise architecture needs as well, and there's great rationale from IT on that side, and we're not necessarily there yet, and that's okay. We will elevate to leadership and make an eventual call. But does that answer your question?
Yeah,
We don't-
that's good. I'm
yeah.
glad to get. We'll judge you later.
Yeah. Keep me honest on it.
I think it's interesting. We've talked a lot about the CFO-CIO relationship and how great that is. However, it seems like there's, to the point about what happens when you disagree, it seems like there's potential that there could be a problem that I don't know how you're going to resolve. So if you think about IT, CIO, CTO, whoever is running the IT organization, the skill set that they have, security, systems, applications, all the focus that they've had, finance, your finance and accounting domain expertise, you understand all that. Maybe on each side, maybe you could be kind of a data forward and analytics forward and have some data science understanding, but neither of the roles is necessarily geared for that. Some companies might have a chief data officer who maybe is more of the data scientist or whatever and is maybe a little bit more set up for AI. Few have chief AI officers right now. I'm wondering, partnership's great, but who do you think it makes the most sense, whether it's an existing role or it's a new role, to really lead AI? Because if it's, you're a master's in accounting and you're a CPA and you've done audit and all that, that doesn't mean you're an AI expert and the kind of equivalent on the IT. So I don't know, what do you guys think about, like ultimately, I know right now.
Ultimately, yeah. I mean, I feel like you've got to have a connector across, because it's not just finance driving AI. Obviously, there are functions that are actually, with good reason, ahead of us in terms of digital investment, and there's got to be that connector and coordinator across the enterprise. And to me, our D&T IT organization plays, I think, ultimately is who is accountable in driving enterprise AI deployment adoption. And then it's on the functions to effectively partner with the org. That's kind of how I see it working. But then I think on the functional side, and I kind of hit on this earlier, we've got to find a way to more sustainably resource, because if it's just AI just becomes another priority that we've got to do amongst others, it's not necessarily going to get over we're not going to make it over the line, right? So I think we've got to have the right dedicated resourcing within our team, and actually we're looking at doing this to create focused AI delivery on a particular manager and analyst as the key priority, so we have that focus and that concentrated effort, and then that connection back to the IT org in terms of driving the enterprise strategy. Right? I don't know if that makes sense or not, but.
Yeah, it makes sense, and I don't know if I have a great answer, but I do think that's why you're seeing a lot of governance across right now. So committees where you've got CFO, CIO, and others involved to do that joint decision making, because it's not necessarily core to any of those roles, but parts of those roles can contribute in the right way to the right decision. I don't know if that's the right answer longer term, but I think that's why you're seeing it happen how it is right now across a lot of companies.
That's a great build.
Yeah. Val, I know you have a kind of a sharp read on that CFO-CIO relationship. I'd love to hear the story that we talked about something finance-led AI that would have failed had you not had IT involved with it at the table from day one.
Yeah, I will echo Colin a bit here. I think it gives me some anxiety when I talk about the processes that I oversee without my tech enablement leader in the room. It's definitely a BFF type situation of, it's maybe even beyond that. I view that person as a thought partner and my strategist. I would say at least once a week, I will reach out and say, so what can AI do if this is my problem? I'm trying to solve this, what can it do? Because I think sometimes I hit my own limit of how I can think about it, but he can say, actually, we could go way past that, and I wouldn't have come up with that on my own, so it's such a strong partnership. I don't think there's anything probably that finance alone would kick off without that partnership in place.
I want to stick with you for a second, Val, as we jump over to the workforce architect side, because you had mentioned before that talent is something that keeps you up at night. And I was thinking about, just as you were describing that setup, the skills that we have aren't necessarily today aligned with whatever the future we're going to have for the kind of thinking that we need to have going forward as AI becomes more and more ubiquitous. So thinking about the new skills that we have to take in, we haven't really even fully defined them yet. What does the finance career ladder look like now at Cargill or maybe more broadly? And I wonder, what is the hardest part about building that, about reskilling and turning the teams into things that we focus on?
Yeah, I have such a passion for this topic. Thank you for the question. I think we were talking a bit backstage on, I have a huge passion for just the accounting and finance profession. I still think it's an amazing way to enter the workforce, and what you can do over the course of a career is just exponential. I look at colleagues that I started in accounting with who are in other functions, leading functions, even outside of finance, with the base that they built, and I don't think that will change. But I think what really gets my head spinning a bit is that everything coming the way of finance and accounting is an and. So it's can you know all the technical areas and be a business partner and know the governance and do the reporting? And can you also drive strategy, learn AI, do this other tech stuff and know your data and all of this? And at some point, we're really overloading a bit. And so we're in the middle of that right now. It's just everything coming at our people is a ton to think about. In fact, one of my team members this week was we also have day jobs. And it's totally fair. And so I think it's a matter of how do you start to build those skills in a way that's incremental, through time, you're learning, you're building, you're growing, and also hire some people that can help raise the whole bar for the whole organization, because there are people that know more than I do and any others on AI, and you put all that together, I think we can all learn together through it.
I'm probably going to butcher this quote because I'm trying to remember it live, and it's several lines long, but there's something that as you talk about what we do in accounting that I always think of, and as automation starts to be able to do more and more, and there's a quote by Clifford Stoll, it goes, "Data is not information, information is not knowledge, knowledge is not wisdom, and wisdom is not understanding." And I always think about that with AI and automation, because as AI moves up and is able to do more and more of those steps, the human value, sure, if we're at the top of the pyramid, if we've got all the experience and everything, that's a great place to be. And we all know accounting is the language of business, and when you understand the accounting, you're able to branch out into other areas. But I think now, and Pam, maybe this is a good question for you, we've had an accountant shortage for a few years now, and AI has come along in the same time, and I think about what AI can do right now. It can take away a lot of the grunt work of our job and let us turn to the more strategic and sort of value-added things rather than just swivel-chairing data or whatever we're doing there. So that's mostly good, but I think about how we all learned coming up that entry-level work that we had to do. It helped us to understand this. With that going away, how do you replace that at OneStream or across at all of our companies?
Yeah, it's a really interesting discussion and research right now. I was actually speaking at a university a couple of months ago, and one of the things that came up was, what do students need to do entering the workforce? And the biggest thing is being curious and trying to absorb as much as possible, because they are less patient, generally speaking. They've had technology since they were born. And so the ability to actually understand the connectivity of things, we, as the people developing them, need to be a lot more conscientious about explaining things, the why, the who, the what, because they're not going to have as much time to learn the connectivity on their own. I think I mentioned at the exec summit yesterday that Drew requires his team to spend almost 6 months without AI coding to make sure that they have the baseline understanding. The reality of it is most of us spent a very long time absorbing the knowledge, learning the things, figuring out how to business partner, and it took a very long time. Even 6 months wouldn't be enough. But you've got to spoon feed, you've got to baby feed, you've got to really take baby steps to actually train and develop new talent, but they will learn much faster than we did too, because they can absorb information faster, they use technology to learn quicker than we did. So all of those things together, we can't let them be bored. Several of the audit partners at multiple Big Four firms I've spoken to have said one of their biggest challenges right now is not only hiring new talent because the accounting shortage, right, and people going into accounting, but keeping the talent once they start in the first 6 months, and that boredom factor, and this isn't what I wanted, and this is not what I expected of it, the number of people leaving in that first 6-month period because it's not what they expected and there is grunt work still, they're trying to figure that out. They have to figure out how to energize new talent to really learn and lean into. So there's still basics of debits and credits that they learned in college. They passed the CPA exam, so they know everything. Every young person knows everything. My son knows everything, rolls his eyes, and all of that good stuff. But they have to learn through making mistakes too, so we have to be ready for that to happen, right? You've got to learn, you've got to let them learn by using AI and developing something and making mistakes and having errors, and then showing them, well, this is why that wasn't complete, because you didn't ask these questions, the data wasn't complete, the close cycle wasn't done, the data wasn't closed, you've got to look for these things. So we have to be ready to actually question. That professional skepticism never goes away, but that's the way we're going to have to develop these new people graduating from college and the new talent coming in the workforce, because they are just going to have to learn differently, and we're going to have to learn with them how to teach them.
Yeah, and this could be a panel in and of itself. Yeah. I mean, this is such an important part to the future of where we're headed. I do want to be conscious of time, and I want to be sure we have time for Q&A. And so I want to go to our last question, and we'll just, Val, maybe we start with you, and then we'll go Colin and then come back to Pam. In one sentence, the next 5 years of AI in finance, if there's just one key thing that you see come out of this, put on your futurist hat, get out your crystal ball, what do you think is different, or the most important thing that happens in the next 5 years around AI in finance and accounting?
Oh, that's such a great question. I mean, I think we evolved to a place that we can't yet picture. So to me, I think it's really all about being moldable, learning, growing, and being open to it. I really think your point's a great one on the boredom factor, right? Like it's a little bit like we're gonna have to knock down some of our own barriers, our own internal barriers to get to where we need to go, and that's okay. But it's gonna be a journey to the point that we probably can't picture it sitting here today 5 years from now.
Colin?
Yeah, it's a great one, and because of that agility that we absolutely need over the next however long. I mean, this is probably more in the near term, but I feel like as we think about CFO going forward, you've got to put this AI as not only a business priority to drive the three-legged stool, if you will, on the results, but it's got to be a culture priority too. It's in there twice at least in terms of where we go forward as a function, because you've got to live it bottoms up. It's got to be part of how we work. It's not just a tool or a capability, and ensuring that it's integrated in how we think going forward is something that I think that CFOs need to think about.
Okay. Pam?
I mean, I'll just close it out by saying flexibility was my term when we were talking about it backstage, but also ready to learn and ready to continue innovating, because as Val said, what we see today is not what's going to be in 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. It's going to continue changing at a faster pace than we even realize today. If you look back 20 years ago, would we think that we'd be talking about the things we are today? Absolutely not. Things innovate faster today than they ever have, and we just have to be flexible and ready to learn and keep riding the wave.
Yeah. So, all right, we're going to have plenty of time for Q&A, and I'm going to be over here scrolling TikTok while you guys answer. No, I feel like I'm, was it George Bush in the debate that kept looking at his watch? I feel like taking out my phone in the middle of a panel is the equivalent of that, but I've got to look at the questions that you guys sent in, so I'm going to be reading these from the phone. So let's see.
There's a lot.
Yeah, there are. Okay. So, and there's the QR if anybody still wants to get a question in. We'll see to land this ship on time. Let's see. With so many isolated AI initiatives across the enterprise, how do we build an overarching AI strategy that breaks down these silos and prevents a fragmented mess of disconnected tools? That is $1 million question right there, but I would love it if anybody's got.
Colin sounds like he knows the answer.
Yeah, I mean, no, I don't have any answers here. No, I think we're all, well, first of all, moment of vulnerability. We probably don't know. We're probably still trying to figure all this out. But I would say it does, to my point earlier, I think we owe it to ourselves and our organization and our team to be a little bit more clear on why, like where we're going from a vision standpoint, specific to, because we talk so much about AI and our digital maturity. Where are we headed and how are we going to get there, and ensure that we align the organization to that vision, and then a little bit more granularity in terms of what and when and how, in terms of roadmaps. So the way I think about it is to bring that I think it was how they express it, fragmented ideas all over the place, is you bring that through your vision, your roadmap, your people, and governance. Those are the 4 legs in my mind right now, top of mind, that I think that you owe it to, again, your function and your team to ensure that is crystal clear, top down. So I don't know, any builds on that?
I mean, I would say I was speaking a little bit yesterday on there is something to acknowledging that it is going to go faster than can necessarily be controlled in some way, right? Because it's everywhere, and it's people writing agents and all sorts of things. So I would agree. I think getting it to a mindset or principles, and I do think there's a funding aspect too. If it's really a big initiative, to have that come through a funnel as it would for any other project in the company, there's value to that. But there is some acknowledgement that this is moving really quickly, and teams are already probably 2 steps ahead of where maybe you think they are.
Next question. This is interesting because the question is, how should leaders present the messaging of an AI project and the inevitable resource reductions? And I think we've all had sort of that existential crisis moment of AI is going to come take my job. And depending on who you listen to these days, you've got your optimists and your pessimists, people wherever they are on the spectrum. But right now, AI is pretty good at doing certain tasks. If you're trying to get people to come on board and help you get ready for AI, and we do things like SOPs for all of our processes and everything, the messaging is a little bit weird. And I think, change management's a big part of this implementation. So being able to get people's buy-in on this, even if you are getting pressure from above there's going to be force reductions associated with this, or maybe there's not, but how do you get the buy-in from the team, give them the security, communicate that what we're doing here? I don't know. I mean, I think this is another one of those very high-level questions that are hard to answer, but I'd love to hear the way you guys are addressing it at your companies.
Well, I think Michael said it yesterday when we were talking to him. There's the numerator and the denominator. The more with the same, or the same with less, was the way he described it. And I think it was a really great way to kind of evolve the discussion around it. And I think most companies they would love to do more with the same, because that's higher output, higher productivity, higher revenue. That's the whole reason you're in business. So hopefully that's the trend we're going to see. But there's the other thing that we were talking about as well, is that AI isn't going to take your job. People who are leveraging AI will. So if you don't learn new technologies, and AI is the new technology, you're going to become an outdated resource that people will leverage. And if you are that person that's creating efficiency or that's finding opportunity to drive some of these performance initiatives, you'll be wanted other places in the organization because you helped that initiative be successful. And I'm sure, as Colin mentioned, the resources, they're begging and cheating and stealing to find them. So if you find a great one that's doing these things, they're actually adding lots of good, check marks to their resume. They're adding a lot of great things that other people will want. So you're not really working yourself out of a job.
Yeah, the simple way I'm thinking about it right now, and my team can check me on this, I'm pretty sure there's more to do right now than there are people.
Yeah.
So there's this productivity gap, if you will, or whatever you want to call it, where it's cliche, but do more with less, I think, is the reality that we're facing right now as finance leaders. And I think the promise of AI is that it can help close that productivity gap. But it's going to require us to work differently, learn differently. So we've got to rethink our operating model end to end, really, as we dive in. But that's how I'm simplistically thinking about it.
Yeah. And one last question. I think this is we're thinking about what the workforce of the future looks like, and I'm sure we've all on our team, we have the champions who have really leaned heavily into this, and they're doing really amazing things, as you were just saying, Pam, with it. But right now, this would be a new role. But I'm wondering if on your team, or I'm not wondering, who asked this question is wondering, do you all have a finance business architect that helps with priorities and documentation of processes and system connection to help enable the tech roadmap? Is there someone on each of your teams, or maybe it could be you on the teams as well, but that is kind of sees the big picture and is helping map this out and help show what the future looks like to everyone else?
I would say from my team standpoint, that's one of the roles we play is, just like I said, stewardship or governance over our architecture or financial infrastructure, if you will. So we do have that. There are many on my team with intimate understanding of the data and how it flows across that architecture. And that's really important as we think about where we're potentially headed, and where we're trying to understand is okay, given that map, where are the opportunities for automation and AI to focus on first versus not, and so on. So I think that's a bit of the journey we're on. But if you don't have that role, I feel like that's a really important enabler of this, is that understanding of your current architecture, as you say.
Yeah, I would say similar. We view it by capability. So for example, I oversee record to report, all of those pieces that Colin referenced, but we have other finance leaders overseeing that on the FP&A side, the credit side, et cetera, to really say, and that will cover data, systems, process, and the strategy that goes with all of that.
How about from your side?
For us, we actually just went through our first year of Sarbanes-Oxley last year, so it was fresh in everybody's mind to do all of this documentation, understand the systems, where the data was moving. So we do have that architecture. Now we need to layer on how we actually are going to leverage AI to add efficiencies there. So even in our base processes, where we use AI today is, honestly, in OneStream with our analytics. We're using Copilot. We're rolling out Claude right now. So there's a lot of opportunity in leveraging those workflows and all of the data that we had to put into SOX. That will actually be a good baseline for us, and so it'll be a really good starting point for our team to look at these. Why are we doing this 6 times? How do we actually make it more efficient? Where can we leverage, AI or Claude to help us? And where can we leverage different tools to actually help build these things faster.
That's great. Like every one of our conversations, this has flown by way too fast. I mean, I feel like we could, and we have been sitting around all day talking about this stuff. And it's really, I've loved the insights from you guys and how much you're bringing to it and hearing what you guys are each doing at your companies. So thank you so much for being on the panel. Thank you to our audience. And with that, we'll wrap it up and let everybody get on to their next session. So thank you all very much.
Thank you.